Hi, this is Monty with Paint the Town. Welcome to the step-by-step instructional video for the cute Highland winter cow. You will need to have ordered and received your 12x16 pre-sketched stretched canvas from Paint the Town. You will need acrylic paint. I'm using red, yellow, blue, white, black, yellow ochre, and brown. You can add other colors as much as you like. Feel free to change up the colors as you go. Buy yourself a paintbrush kit. That way you're using brushes you're comfortable with. Watch ahead and then rewind and fast forward as needed. Okay, you should have received a pre-sketched 12x16 stretched canvas. The cute Highland cow in the snow. Now make sure you have your brushes ready, water to wash your brushes, and a towel to keep them dry, your paints. And I went over those paints before. Now we're going to first start on our background. Now I'm going to use a 3/8 inch angle brush. That way the point of it can get into the edges. And we're going to first just paint around the outside edge of the cow and above her horizon. You can use a dark blue if you like. That works just as well. Always try to paint in a comfortable position. So I'm going to first I'm painting my background black, and I'm going to just paint around the outside edge of the cow where the sky will be. Mark where you want your horizon line. Also, rotate your canvas around as you paint. It'll make it easier for you to paint if you can see the edge of your brush and the edge of what you're painting. So I like to paint anything I'm painting on the far side of where I'm painting. So my right hand, I want to paint the right side. We're just going to paint around the outside edge of the cow. I usually try to make sure I paint on that sketch line, just in case the color of paint I use is not heavy enough to cover the sketch. I always try to make sure I rotate the canvas to make it comfortable to paint. And I always try to keep the painting to the left of my dominant hand. So I'm right-handed, I want to keep the drawing, and I want to paint the outside edge to the left of my dominant hand. That way I can see the edge of the drawing and the end of my brush easily without my hand getting in the way. Play some music while you paint. It'll help open you up. Now, your horizon doesn't have to be flat. My little Highland cow lives on a little bit of a hill. I'm going to wash this brush, and I'm going to switch to a bigger brush now. That way I can cover that background easily, quickly, and smoothly. If you want to, as you hit a side of your canvas, paint it. That way you don't have to worry about framing it. Like I said, you can use black paint, make it a dark blue sky if you like to, mix the black and blue together, however you think you'd like your night sky to be. I chose black so that the cow jumps off the canvas. If you want, you can do a daytime setting, make it more of a baby blue sky if you like. I do think the black helps the snowflakes stand out and be more prominent. Remember, if you're going to paint your sides, paint a side as you hit it. If you forget to, you can always paint it later. I'm using a nice big brush. Mine's a 1.5 inch flat brush, but with the 12x16 canvas, you might use an 1 inch flat brush. Don't let your type A kind of take control. If you see brush strokes, I think that's cool and artsy and makes it feel like there might be an element to the sky. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, you're going to let that background dry some before this next step. But the next step is to take some brown paint and mix it with some of that yellow ochre. Now, you're able to make this painting as light or as dark as you want. If you want to go a brighter, more blonde Highland cow, make your color choices brighter and not as dark. I'm going for a medium tone, so I'm going to start with mixing some of that brown with that yellow ochre. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start taking a 3/8 inch angle brush, or you can use a 1/4 inch angle brush, and I'm going to start covering the lines with this darker color. This is going to give our cow some shape. What we will do is then come back in the middle with a brighter color. So first take this darker version of the cow and create your shadow, your depth, his shape. I'm using the angle brush sideways where I pull the point and it follows behind. And just cover those lines. Don't be shy with the paint. If you're a little bit heavier with the paint, when you paint in the middle, you'll be able to blend into them a little bit. I like to add a shadow underneath his bangs on the top of his snout. Makes it seem like there's some depth to his bangs. We're just going to continue to cover all the fur color lines with this medium brown. You'll do his entire head and his body. I'm going to go around his cheeks and under his chin as well. Don't worry about doing the snout or around the eyes. That we'll do in a different way. Just the fur is what we're painting. I even like to add a little shadow under, I want to call it his chest hair. Give some depth to that chest. Be sure to wash and dry your brush well. And what we're going to do now is come back in with a yellow ochre and white mixture. I'm not going to add too much white to mine, but if you like it, if you're making a brighter, more blonde Highland cow, you're going to have a little bit more white, making it a lighter color. Remember, you can always pause and rewind this video as often as you like. I'm going to use my 3/8 inch angle brush. I would suggest maybe you're using a 1/4 inch angle brush. And we're going to start filling in between the dark lines we just did. If you want to blend the edges of those together, you can. If you accidentally pull some of that darker color out into the lighter color, that's kind of cool. It just gives his fur a little bit more depth of color and keeps it from being a flat painting. If your black paint's not dry, you might accidentally pull some of that black paint into your fur color. So make sure your black paint is dry before you start all these steps. You can already see how that gives it shape. And if I wanted to, I could use more different colors, lighter and darker tones of that yellow ochre just to make it seem more realistic if you like. But what's nice about this painting is realism isn't what we're looking for. We're looking for cute. We're just putting in layers of color. Right now we're putting in a undertone that we can build upon. So in the original, you'll see a lot more white and lighter fur colors on top of this. We do that a little bit later. Now what I do is I kind of try to blend into that shadow color, and you see how that kind of fades together that way. I always try to keep my brush strokes going the way I think the fur will flow. And then if I leave brush strokes and it makes the fur seem more realistic, I'm good with that. A little happy accident, right? You may be wondering why I'm not playing background music. It's copyright issues. As soon as I put music in this, the video people want to mute my entire video. So feel free to play some music while you play. Just turn my volume up so you can hear me when I speak and enjoy whatever type of music you like. Music makes the paint flow better. Also, your two colors don't have to be as far apart as mine. I like the dark and the light bright together. It gives contrast. Maybe you want a more subtle change. It's whatever you like. I think contrast works better in painting. So I do like the sharp change between the brown to the lighter yellow ochre. You can come back in, and if the yellow ochre seems flat, take some darker versions of it and you can work on the shadow a little bit more and blend those together better. I can fix some of the, say I get a little too bright, then I can bring some dark back in. So take a look at it, back away from it, and see what you think so far. You can also come back in and start adding some lighter fur. I like making his bangs a little lighter. It brings them out a little farther and gives him more shape and depth. This is just the first layer of the lighter color. I'm going to come back and brighten that up again later. I also like adding that lighter yellow ochre, some white and yellow mixture on his chest as well. It gives it more of a shape and a meaning, I think. Be sure to wash and dry your brushes as you go along. Don't leave them set in paint nor water. It's hard on them. We're going to paint his hat and his stocking first, the dark areas, and we use a similar technique as we did with his fur. I first come in with a slightly darker version of the color. So I'm doing kind of a lavender stocking cap. So I first come in with a darker lavender on the outside edges of the dark area of the hat. The brim of the hat will be a different color. Then I come with the outside edges of his scarf underneath the chin to give it some depth. This is going to be the darker version of the color. I'm going to make a lavender scarf and hat with a yellowish brim and fluffy ball on top. So first we come back with this darker edge around the each side, under the chin, and along the bottom of the scarf edge since it's kind of rounded off. Put a shadow on the lower part of the scarf underneath that wraparound part of the scarf. down each side of the lower part of the scarf. And in that little nook area, add a little dark color to create some depth like it's folded. So now what I'm going to do is just add more white, a lot of white, to that lavender color and fill in between, giving the hat and the scarf some shape by using shadow and highlight. You can choose to blend the edges of these two colors together or not. It's whatever style you choose. I like to blend them together slightly. Again, we're just putting in some flats in. We'll come back in and even add more shadow and highlights to use to give them even more shape. But I gotta have something to build upon. So I just put some medium shadows and some medium lights in there first. Be sure to cover those sketch lines, make them disappear as you paint. I'm going to paint the snout next. So what I'm going to do is take and make a pink and add some brown to it to warm it up some and completely fill it in along the bottom and each side. If you put a little bit lighter pink in the middle, you get some shape. We'll build up on that later, but we have to have something to build on. So you can see how it's a little slightly darker on the outside edge, on his little chin, and lighter in the middle of the snout. I'm going to use the same technique I did earlier. I'm going to put a darker version of the color. Since I'm using yellow, I'm making kind of a darker yellow around the outside edge. Then add some white to it and fill in the middle. So this is the darker version first. You may want to add some yarn extensions to his scarf down there. Some white to that color that you're using. I'm using yellow. It could be any color you like. And give it the same effect. It's going to be brighter in the middle, darker on the outsides. Add a few lighter sections of yarn down here in the end piece. And then give him a nice fluffy ball for his cap. On his horns, you can paint them a flat gray or a brownish gray, whichever you choose. I'm just painting more of a flat color now. If you like, you can use that same technique. You can go a darker edge and a brighter middle. Take that gray and paint his hoofs as well. I believe that painting is about getting something down on the canvas that we can build upon. We can always decide if it's flat and needs improvement as we go along. I always like to paint the irises in first before I paint the pupil. This way I don't have to be so perfect. I can paint the iris and bleed over into the pupil, and all I have to do is make sure that the outer edge is where I want it. The inner edge will be fixed when I put the pupil in there. The black will cover it. I'm going with kind of a mint green for his iris, his eye color. You can use any color you like. I probably used too big a brush for that, but it worked out just fine. Maybe a smaller angle brush might have worked better. Something like a 1/8 to 1/4 inch angle brush. On the snow, I'm going to use a similar technique as earlier. I start with the shadow color. So I'm coming in with a baby blue. I'm going to start and paint near the horizon and around his body. I'm going to first start with a blue and white. It's basically a baby blue color. This is creating depth to the snow. The darker color is going to push the background away and give us shape and shadow underneath our cow. When I paint, I like to listen to classic rock. Pablo Cruz Radio on Pandora is my favorite. What do you like to listen to as you paint? Some people like silence. All right, so once I get my baby blue down in my snow, I'm gonna wash and dry that brush. I'm gonna pick up some white paint and paint the snow area, blending the two edges together. Be sure that you put a decent amount of baby blue paint down so that it stays wet long enough that you can blend together the two colors. So I'm just going to take white paint on my brush, paint white, and I'm going to purposely hit that blue to blend the two edges together and pull that blue into the white. I don't want to see a harsh line between the two. Paint blends better by not adding more paint. Just take the paint that's on the canvas and work the two together. So I want to add a little shape to my cow's horn. So I'm going to take a darker gray and add some shadow edges to it. That was a little too bright there, or too dark. Just lighten it up just a little bit. What I'm trying to do is anything that seems like it's just a flat color, I want to add shadow and highlight to give it more depth. I want to have at least 2 or 3 tones of that color creating shape. Now we're going to start adding snow. I want to use my 1/4 inch angle brush, and there's going to be some snow sitting on top of this little fluffy ball up there and on top of his stocking cap. Just white paint, painted the way you think the snow would sit there. Try to daub the paint and not spread it as much. If you spread white paint, sometimes it'll thin down and you can see the background through it. So you want this decently heavy so it's covering well. Imagine that the snow's just sitting on top of his ears and his horns and his hat. I'm going to also brighten up his bangs a little bit more. I'm going to give him almost a white tint to that to make it seem like he has a different color bang. Maybe his top of his nose there gets a little bit of highlight. See how I highlighted just above his snout. So add a little bit more white here in his chest area. Maybe there's snow sitting down there on top of the bottom part of his stocking or his scarf. One thing I do like to add is I call them star flakes. So I do kind of a elongated plus with an X across the middle. These are optional. You don't have to do them. If you just want to do snow balls or snowflakes, you can. I like these star flakes. I think it gives it another element of interest. All of the star flakes are is I make a plus left and right, up and down, and then an X across the middle. They can be different sizes. I like big fluffy snowflakes. Some are tiny, some are bigger. I like snow that makes sound when it hits the ground. One of the hardest things about painting snowflakes is making it seem random. So make some bigger ones, some smaller ones, make some close together and far apart. You can put as many snowflakes as you like. My wife doesn't like any snow in her paintings. Remember, snow is not only in the sky, but will be in front of or in between you and the Highland cow. So a few snowflakes on his body makes it seem like there's depth to the painting, that there's snow not only behind but in front of. For some of the detail work, sometimes I like to use an acrylic paint pen. You can use a small pointy paintbrush if you like, but I believe that you'll have a little bit more control with a paint pen. Remember to let your painting dry as you move along. Can't paint on wet paint with a paint pen, or you might end up also getting your pinky or hand in wet paint. I have a tendency to try to move too quickly. So outline the eyes, add the eyelashes, circle in where you want his pupil to be. You can use black or dark brown to put the nostrils back in that we painted over earlier. You can fill in the pupil with the paint pen, or you can come back and paint in with black paint with your paintbrush, either way. I found the paint pens are a little bit thin sometimes, so I like to go ahead and any larger areas just hit with the paintbrush instead. can also add some shadow, dark grays or black on the top portion of his hooves, just giving it some depth so it's just not a flat gray. I felt that the scarf was a little flat, so I'm going to come back in and add a little bit more shadow, darker purple, underneath that edge of the scarf on either side, just here and there. I'm trying to add another tone there, just to give it more depth and shape. You can add a little bit of that darker color under the chin to bring the chin out a little bit more if you like. Felt the same way about the yellows, so I'm going to add some darker yellow. I'm going to take some yellow and some yellow ochre and mix it together. This will give us a little bit more shape, adding those contrasting shadows. I really love adding highlights to the eye. Usually just put a couple of dots, similar placement on both eyes. You can even highlight the nose. I'm going to come in and add a darker pink underneath his snout above his chin, just to give it some depth here on the bottom edge of the snout as well, adding some shadow color here, also inside the nose a little bit, giving that some depth. This I added a little bit more brown to the pink. Let's darken it up. You see how adding a little bit more darker tone will give that more shape. You can even come back in with a brighter pink, just trying to give it more tones so it's not so flat and one-dimensional. I could probably come make those a little brighter. Now make a brighter version of your eye color, the mint green I'm using. I want to come in and add a little bit more white to it. And just in that bottom third of his iris area, I want to add a little bit brighter color, just to give his iris two tones versus a flat mint green. Little details like that Just add a little bit more excitement to the painting and interest. Another thing I like to do is I can come back in with a smaller brush or paint pen. This is an acrylic paint pen I'm using. And I'm going to put some highlights. This is like that brighter tan color that we have on the cow. And just, let the hair shows a little bit more. Just highlight the tips of the hairs, and you can extend the hair out over the background a little bit more to make it seem like there's just little hairs here and there. Just little highlights here and there, like highlighting the tips of the hairlines, making them stand out a little bit more. I'm just using that white and baby poop yellow brighter tone. I'm sorry, white and yellow ochre brighter tone. You can just add little hairs here and there, just adding more interest and shape. You can even take a brighter pink, just give some brighter highlights to that snout. Little details matter sometimes. Take some black and just under the snout, above that chin, add a little black to show that maybe his mouth's open ever so slightly.